Welcome back to Crime Cream, where we unravel the darkest mysteries. Today, we are talking about a guy who's basically the real-life version of every criminal mastermind you've ever seen in a movie. Charles Sobhraj, aka the Serpent, aka the Bikini Killer. This dude was so smooth, so manipulative, that he fooled everyone from cops to his closest friends. And while he was at it, he left a trail of bodies from Europe to Asia. Yes, it's gonna get dark. But before we get into this insane story, do me a favor. Smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's start from the beginning. Charles Sobhraj was born in 1944 in Saigon, now known as Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. His birth name was known as Hachand Bonani Gurmukh Charles Sobhraj, which, let's be honest, is already a mouthful of trouble. His mom was Vietnamese and his dad was an Indian tailor, who wasn't exactly the father of the year material. But here's the thing, they split up faster than you can say custody battle, leaving Charles to be bounced around like a bad check. After his parents split up, Charles' mom got remarried to a French army lieutenant and the family moved to France. This is where Charles got his first taste of the high life and crime. Even as a kid, he was running scams, stealing from his classmates, and generally being a little But here's the kicker. He wasn't just some street thug. He was a charmer, a smooth talker who could con his way out of anything. This kid wasn't just a delinquent. He was a prodigy of deceit. And that's a skill he would perfect over the years. By the 1960s, Charles was a young man in Paris, mixing with the city's underworld. Now, when I say underworld, I'm talking about a place where the line between a cocktail party and a criminal conspiracy is about as thin as a sheet of a paper. Charles wasn't just dabbling in petty crimes. He was learning the art of manipulation from the best in the game. He pulled off petty crimes, sure, but his specialty was seducing wealthy women, convincing them to bankroll his lifestyle. I mean, the guy had a serious game, so much so that he married one of his marks, Chantal Compagnon, who was as infatuated with him as he was with the crime. Together, they had a daughter, but Charles wasn't exactly the stay-at-home type dad. Imagine someone like James Bond, but with zero moral compass. Yes, it was clear from the get-go. This kid wasn't gonna be working a 9 to 6. Nope, this kid was just getting started. And by started, I mean he was about to go on a crime spree that spanned continents. You won't believe what Charles did next. Stay tuned as we dive into his most infamous crimes. Charles's taste for crime couldn't be contained by just one country. Oh no, this guy went global. He and Chantal hit the road, scamming and stealing across Europe and Asia. Picture this, a young couple, dressed to the nines, living in luxury hotels, driving fancy cars, all on someone else's dime. They were the Bonnie and Clyde of the jet set. Except their game wasn't just about robbing the banks. Charles was into identity theft, forgery, and of course, his old favorite, seducing rich women to fund their escapades. He got caught a few times, spent some time in jail, but he always managed to escape. Seriously, the guy broke out of prison like it was his side hustle. In Greece, he faked an illness and escaped from the hospital. In Afghanistan, he drugged a guard, took his keys and waltzed right out. I mean, who does that? But Charles wasn't just a globe-trotting con man. By the early 1970s, Charles had found his ultimate playground, the hippie trail in Southeast Asia. Back then, this trail was a popular route for Western backpackers. Charles had crafted a new identity as a wealthy gem dealer in Bangkok. And this is where things get really dark. Sobhraj began targeting young Western tourists, the kind of people who were just out there trying to find themselves in exotic locales. Backpackers, hippies, students on their gap year, These were the dreamers, the idealists, and to Charles, they were the perfect prey. He would cozy up to these naive travelers, offer them a place to crash, a meal, a friendly face, and then he would drug them with powerful sedatives. And when they were out cold, he would drop them blind or worse, kill them in the most brutal way imaginable. These weren't just random acts of violence. They were calculated, cold-blooded executions. But here's what makes Charles Sobhraj different from your average serial killer. The guy was a master of deception. The guy had more aliases than you could count. Like seriously, he was going by names like Alain Gautier, Andre Boucher, and even Daniel Sermeja. Each name came with a fake backstory, fake passports, and a whole lot of charm. It was like he was playing the ultimate game of hide and seek, only with the world's law enforcement. This dude was like the ultimate con artist. And while the world was trying to figure out who he really was, Charles was busy adding more names to his hit list. Things are about to get darker. Don't go anywhere. We are about to discover how Charles earned his deadly nickname. Sobhraj was known as the Serpent, and for good reason. He was slippery, cunning, and utterly ruthless. His MO was cold-blooded. He would slip sedatives in his victims' drinks, leaving them defenseless. Then, when they were out cold, he would either strangle them or drown them. Sometimes he would burn the bodies to destroy evidence. What's terrifying is how methodical he was, like he was running a business, not murdering people. Each murder wasn't just a crime, it was a move in a bigger game. A game where he always made sure the odds were stacked in his favor. Now, let's dive into the part that's both horrifying and, unfortunately, the most telling: his victims. Among his victims was Teresa Knowlton, an American whose body was found in a tidal pool in Thailand in 1975. She was dressed in a bikini, which led to Charles being dubbed the Bikini Killer. Her death was initially ruled as an accident, because hey, who's gonna suspect the charming French guy, right? But this was just the beginning. Next, we've got the Dutch couple Henk and Cornelia Hemke, who were traveling through Thailand. Charles lured them in with promises of a good time, drugged them, and then strangled them to death. Their bodies were found, burned beyond recognition, and dumped on the outskirts of Bangkok. And get this, he even had the audacity to attend their autopsies, pretending to be a concerned friend. I mean, talk about cold-blooded. And check this out, he didn't even work alone. He had a gang, including his loyal girlfriend, Marie-Andre Leclerc, who was so under his spell that she was willing to do whatever it took to keep him happy. Then there was Ajay Chaudhry, his right-hand man, who helped him with the dirty work. Together, they formed what press would later call the Bikini Killer Gang. They were like some twisted, murderous version of Ocean's 11, except their heists ended in bodies, not banknotes. The level of control Sobhraj had over his accomplices was almost cult-like. They weren't just following orders. They were devoted to him, willing to do anything to please him, even if it meant becoming complicit in murder. And while bodies were piling up, Charles was living it up, hosting parties, gambling away his stolen money, and traveling first class. Each victim was more than just a name to Charles. They were a means to an end. He would steal their passports, their identities, and their money, using their documents to move freely across borders. This guy was the OG identity thief, long before the internet made it cool. Charles' luck can't last forever. Next up, we'll see how the law finally caught up with the Serpent. Alright, now let's talk about the global manhunt that finally brought this psychopath down. By the mid-1970s, Sobhraj's crime spree was making headlines worldwide. The bodies were starting to pile up, and authorities across multiple countries were piecing together the horrifying patterns. Interpol issued a red notice. and suddenly, Sobhraj was a wanted man in half the world. But catching him wasn't easy. He was a master of disguise, constantly changing his appearance, using fake passports, and slipping through borders like a ghost. The guy had more aliases than a spy novel. If you're wondering how he managed to evade capture for so long, it's because he was always one step ahead. He wasn't just running from the law, he was playing with them, leading them on a global chase while he continued his killing spree. But even the best criminals slip up, and Sobhraj's downfall began in India. In 1976, he tried to poison a group of French tourists in New Delhi, but one of them fought back, leading to him and his accomplices arrested. When the Indian authorities realized who they had in custody, they couldn't believe their luck. Sobhraj was sentenced to 12 years in Tihar jail, one of India's most notorious prisons. But here's the twist. He actually wanted to get caught. Why? You see, Sobhraj knew that if he served time in India, he could avoid extradition to Thailand, where he was facing the death penalty. It was a calculated move. Talk about playing 4D chess. This wasn't just a man running from justice. It was a man who was always strategizing his next move. But hold on to your hats, because this story is far from over. In 1986, with just a few years left on his sentence, Charles pulled off one of the most audacious prison escapes in history. He threw a birthday party for the guards, drugged them with pills laced in sweets, and then just walked out of the prison like it was no big deal. Why? Because Thailand had a warrant for his arrest that would expire in 20 years. If he was extradited to Thailand before that warrant expired, he would likely be executed. But his freedom was short-lived. He was caught again in Goa a few weeks later, and this time, the authorities weren't taking any chances. He was put back in Tihar to serve out the remainder of his sentence. Sobhraj's story has one last twist. Keep watching to find out how it all ended and what's coming next on Crime Cream. Fast forward to 1997. After serving his time in India, Charles Sobhraj walks out of Tihar jail as a free man. Yes, you heard me right. The dude who had been linked to at least 12 murders, countless scams, and a prison escape was back on the streets. And what does he do? He starts shopping his life story around, looking to cash in on his notoriety with book deals and movie rights. It's like, seriously, dude? He's a mass murderer, not a rock star. But that's Sobhraj for you. Always looking for the next con, the next way to stay in the spotlight. He was so caught up in his own legend that he didn't realize that his time was running out. But karma wasn't done with Charles just yet. In 2003, Charles made the not-so-smart decision to return to Nepal, one of the few places where he still had an outstanding warrant for murder. And just like that, his luck ran out. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to life in prison. This time, there was no escapes, no slick legal maneuvers. The Serpent was finally caged for good. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The man who thought he could outsmart the world was finally brought down by his own hubris. And while rotting away in Nepalese jail, Sobhraj's story took one last bizarre twist. He married a woman named Nihita Biswas, who was 44 years younger than him and claimed he was innocent. She called him a kind and gentle soul, which, let's be real, is probably the wildest thing in this whole saga. I mean, are we talking about the same guy who literally poisoned people for fun? The fact that Sobhraj could still manipulate people, even from behind bars, just shows the extent of his psychological hold on others. After spending nearly 2 decades in Nepal, Charles Sobhraj was released in 2022 due to old age and declining health. At 78, he walked out of prison once again. But this time, he wasn't the invincible Serpent of old. The world had moved on, and Sobhraj's legacy was cemented as one of the most chilling calculated, and cold-hearted killers in history. His release wasn't a victory, it was quite anticlimactic end to a life of chaos. In the end, the world didn't cheer for his freedom. It sighed in relief that his reign of terror was finally, truly over. Alright folks, so what have we learned today? Charles Sobhraj was more than just a killer. He was a master manipulator, a con artist, and a man who lived by his own twisted code. His story is a chilling reminder that evil doesn't always come with a warning sign. Sometimes it wears a smile and offers you a drink. Sobhraj wasn't just a monster. He was a man who understood human nature all too well and used that understanding to destroy lives. So stay sharp, stay safe, and remember, no matter how charming someone might seem, you never know what darkness they might be hiding. That's it for today's episode of Crime Cream. If you are freaked out by this story as I am, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe and that notification bell. We've got no shortage of dark tales to tell. Drop a comment below on what case we should cover next, and let's talk about what drives a guy like Charles Sobhraj. Do you think it's his nature, nurture, or just pure evil? Let's get the conversation started. See you next time on Crime Cream.